commission discussion, and then we're going to take public comment. So in the beginning of the agenda, there's a couple of paragraphs about doing public comment a bit different, limiting to 3 minutes unless further time is granted. So we'll just get started with introductions, because I don't see everybody's name. I see some phone numbers, so I think introductions are nice, but also it'll help Marlis know for sure who's present. So my name is Ann Kish, and I work at the University of Montana Western. I'm the State Library Commission Chair.
I'm Kenning Arlich. I work at Montana State University Bozeman, and I am a commissioner.
This is Erin LaFramboise, a commissioner from Browning, Montana.
Jamie Doggett, commissioner from White Sulphur Springs.
This is Elsie Arnson, state superintendent.
Bruce Newell, commissioner.
This is Jenny Stapp.
Ken Wall.
Oh, sorry, Ken.
So this is Ken Wall, commissioner from Missoula, online.
I think that's all the commissioners, correct? I think so. And Erin, I couldn't hear you very well, Erin, and it might just be that you were soft-spoken. I wonder if you could move closer to your mic, or did you guys have any problem, Erin, Helena, hearing Erin?
We could hear Erin okay.
Okay, it might just be me then. So I'd love to have everybody else introduce themselves in attendance.
Why don't you go ahead, Melissa?
Okay, I'll start. I'm Melissa Williams, State Library staff.
Scott Bloom, Montana Natural Heritage Program.
Braden Burkholder with the Heritage Program. Bryce Maxwell, Program Coordinator with the Montana Natural Heritage Program. Dave Ratz, the web guy at the Heritage Program.
Kay Hajek with Heritage Program.
Evan Hammer, State Library.
Marla Stark, State Library.
I'm Patrick Beto with Elsie Arnson staff.
Is that everyone?
We've got a few more online.
Linda Vance, senior ecologist, Montana Natural Heritage Program.
Jessica Mitchell, Natural Heritage Program.
Okay.
We have someone just identified as listener. If you could please identify yourself.
That's my mom. I figured I'd give her something to listen to.
Could we get your name for the record, please?
I don't think that we allowed the microphone. It's Carol Hudson.
Okay, so I think that's everybody. So we're going to start out, and most of today is going to be a talk about the study administration of the Montana Natural Heritage Program, and also some information from the meeting that we had with the Commissioner of Higher Education. And so we'll begin with Jenny.
Thanks, Ann. I just wanted to start by recapping where we left the December meeting so that we're all on the same page. As you know, we had a lengthy discussion about the state library's concerns with regard to our ability to plan for the stability and the strategic direction of the Heritage Program, and a proposal to transfer that administration from a contract with the University of Montana to the state library. And after lengthy discussion, the commission moved that we should have a meeting with the Office of the Commissioner of Higher Education to further discuss their concerns. And so this meeting, as Ann said, is really a chance for us to recap the meeting that occurred with OCHI on January 22nd. I think we have, at least to some degree, a better understanding of what their concerns are. And then to talk about some possible resolution that I think could be mutually beneficial for the program, for the state library, and hopefully for OCHI as well. I just want to ask again, I don't know that OCHI has a representative on the call for at this meeting. I certainly, if there is a representative, want to make sure that they have a chance to share in public comment. So what we prepared for the meeting with OCHI is a document, and gosh darn it, all of these things are up. So let's see if I can open this up. We prepared a one-page handout for the Commissioner's office, and for your information, the people present at that meeting were Melissa Williams and Evan Hammer from our staff, Mike Mannion, an attorney from the Department of Administration, Commissioners and Commissioner Kenny Arlich, the McCall Flynn, the Governor's Education Policy Advisor, Jason Harlow from the Governor's Office of Budget and Program Planning, Tyler Trevor, the Deputy Commissioner of Higher Ed, Viv Hamill, the attorney who was present at your December commission meeting, and Scott Wittenberg, the Vice President for Research.
And you were also there, Jenny.
Yes, thank you, Kenny. So as I was saying, we prepared this overview with the understanding that most of the representatives within OCHI don't have a lot of familiarity with what the Heritage Program is, what they do, what our overall concerns are, and some background about the recommendation. And just to kind of recap, again, for the commission as well, the concerns initially framed around the loss of core funding are really about the future of the program and the stability of the program, and the fact that since the beginning of the program and since 2005 when the program was transferred to the university, we've continued to see an erosion in the core funding, the number of staff the core funding is able to fund the staff positions, a shift in the work from core work to project work as the program has been forced to backfill the loss of core funding with project dollars, and ultimately then a decline in our ability to provide for those core services that are really inherent in the statute that the State Library has to operate the Montana Natural Heritage Program. And much of this information is, of course, information you've seen before. We know that there's been a significant decline in both the dollars and the real dollars of the core contract dollars that the State Library receives to administer the program. We've actually had a decline in the overall number of FTE that those core dollars have funded since 2005 when the program was moved to the University of Montana. And then in a chart that Bryce provided, of course, a significant increase in project dollars, which does ensure the short-term health of the program, but doesn't ensure any kind of guarantee that the core work is being conducted or that there's any kind of long-term future stability. And then, of course, you have in your meeting materials the FY19 report from Bryce about the work that's been conducted by the program. And again, I want to say there's incredible work going on with the program, significant efforts to collect new data under different kinds of project work. The partners, of course, greatly value the program, but as the report says, there's just limited ability to accomplish those core functions because of the lack of core funding. So we had a long conversation at the meeting with OCHI about these kinds of concerns. And I think I came away understanding that they had three primary concerns about the proposal. One based on the public comment feedback that was received from staff and various partners about breaking the program. They talked about the loss of FTE for the University of Montana, as well as the loss of funding to the University Office of Research. Those were my sense of the three concerns that were voiced by OCHI. And I wanted to ask Ann and Kenning if there was any other information from that meeting that you wanted to share.
Okay. I had the same takeaways regarding the concerns from that meeting. I also thought it was interesting. This is a program that is so reliant on partnerships. And so when we talk about a partnership, you know, we've had a partnership with Missoula for a long time. When we talk about a partnership, I think it's interesting, and so did the commissioners of higher ed, to look at a partnership with the Office of Commissioner of Higher Ed in general, as opposed to the partnership with a singular university. And I think we'll get into that possibility at length. But you know, that means that would entail expanding partnerships. And what's interesting about the University of Missoula, the OCHI, all of the other different universities, is that, you know, they all have different organizational culture, different norms of behavior, and some of those are incredibly different than what the organizational culture and norms of behavior are at the state library. And yet I don't think that precludes a partnership in any way. I think that sometimes, you know, when you have meetings and you have certain expectations of how meetings work, and how discourse, what kind of discourse is normal, it can be confusing when you have partnerships that have, with partners that have very different takes on their operation. But ultimately, OCHI and the Montana State Library have similar visions and goals for this program. And so I don't think that any differences in culture and norms of procedure, although we may have to adjust to one another in some new ways, I don't think it precludes any partnerships. You know, I was really heartened about how close OCHI's vision and the Montana State Library's visions are for this program. Kenning?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything more substantive to add to that, except that I'm hopeful that this has opened up a communication channel between OCHI and the State Library that wasn't there before.
Agreed.
So one of the things we talked about with the OCHI representatives is a point that we've talked about here at the State Library quite a bit over the last several months, and that's the fact that there could be additional opportunity to work more directly with the broader Montana University system, including some of the affiliate campuses, and that's something that seemed to resonate with OCHI. We've definitely sensed a shift in their thinking and their approach as we started talking about what that might look like. And they were open at that meeting to talking about a memorandum of understanding with OCHI's office, with the university system, that would allow for easier contracting through the various affiliate campuses. So I want to ask if there's any questions from the commissioners about the meeting with OCHI before we start talking about what this could potentially look like.
This is Bruce. I'm curious if this being seen as an opportunity to involve tribal colleges was broached during the meeting.
It was, yes.
Great.
So Jenny, this is Elsie. When it came to that discussion, were there any other avenues of having, how do I want to say, having your proposal being looked at positively going forward, either in an incremental stage, or were they just, was this an informational meeting? So did anything come out of the meeting that would point to either an up or down of this proposal with OCHI?
We left the meeting with the understanding that we were going to come back to the commission and report to the commission about the meeting, but that the next step would be negotiating that kind of MOU.
Whose responsibility was it left to draft that? A joint or just MSL?
Starting with MSL, working with attorney Mike Manning.
And then run to OCHI.
Exactly. Any other questions? So I want to walk us through some thoughts that we as staff have had since the meeting with OCHI that I think would largely address my concerns and the concerns of the State Library staff, as well as the concerns that we were hearing from OCHI and the concerns that we've heard from the Heritage Program staff and partners. And Elsie, to your question, is more of an incremental approach than what you originally saw at your December meeting. And I want to focus on an idealized vision of the program. And let's see if I can. I have no idea how to move this stuff around without ruining our meeting. So I'm gonna try to. Let's see. So I want to remind the commission about a chart. It's a chart that you've seen before. It's a chart that Bryce prepared and we used often when we talk about the core funding's ability to fund the core staff of the Heritage Program. The fact that the existing funding does not allow for full funding for the staff, staff that would do that kind of core work. In our idealized view of the program, again, we're talking about a program of the State Library, but one where there's full funding for the core positions associated with the program. And those are the positions you see outlined here: the program coordinator, finance position, the information services positions, including the database manager, the web programmer, the data specialists, and then the senior science staff. Right now, we have enough funding to fund the program coordinator, the finance position, as well as the information services staff through the funding that the State Library has to operate the program. But we don't have enough funding to fund those core science positions, and as you know, most of those positions' time then is spent working on project dollars. Again, in an idealized world, we would have full funding for all of these positions, and they're able to focus their time on the core mission of the program, including those kinds of core services that are accomplished to some degree, but not fully. And there's some differences of opinion about the amount of time staff should be spending working on grants and projects versus working on the core. But again, if we look to the statute for the program, I think ideally those would be fully funded positions focusing on managing the data, making sure that our patrons and partners have access to the data, and that we're doing everything we can to make sure that the data is managed well and accessible. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't want to continue to manage grants and contracts that can result in very positive deliverables of core services, as well as value-added products and services to support the program. So also in this idealized vision of the program, we do continue a relationship not only with the University of Montana, but with the broader university system to ensure that those kinds of opportunities are still maximized, and potentially looking to additional partners to do that kind of work, an opportunity that we've never really explored. So I want to walk you through an updated version of a more incremental timeline that I think can accomplish this idealized vision over the long term. It's not a near-term solution, as I've said all along. Without additional funding, there is no silver bullet. But we believe through a modified relationship with the university system, there's some real opportunity for us to strive to reach that idealized vision of the program while continuing to maximize the relationships with the university system as well as our partners. So what I'm sharing, I'm going to try to make this just a little bit larger for everybody, is a proposal, and I want to try to walk you through the proposal in a couple of different ways. The current model is, of course, that the state library is contracting with the University of Montana. So our responsibility for the program is really at arm's length through that contract. And the University of Montana has the core funding, that funding that comes in the state library's budget, as well as the supplemental funding that's received from partners, the funding that's not necessarily for specific deliverables, but for the overall operation and administration of the program. All of the staff, which are University of Montana employees, the decision-making and strategic direction of the program is all largely made at the University of Montana. They administer grants and contracts on behalf of the program. They have that authority to apply for grants and contracts and to enter into those contracts, and they administer the spatial analysis lab. A more compromised, more incremental opportunity for us to continue that relationship with the broader university system would involve administering the program here at the State Library, where the State Library and the State Library Commission, under our statutory authority, would be responsible for the decision-making and the strategic direction of the program. We would retain that core funding that's in our budget currently for the operation of the program. We would work with the university system to either transfer or pass through the supplemental funding that's currently at the university for the operation of the program, and that was something that the university system was open to in our meeting that we had with them on the 22nd. The state library would have the ability to apply for grants and contracts to enhance the operation of the program. And then we would administer those grants and contracts as well as all of the associated staff. Under this recommendation, we would partially move some of the staff from the University of Montana to the State Library, specifically the program coordinator position, as well as the information services staff. Under this model, we would negotiate an MOU with the university system to allow for us to work in partnership with the various affiliate campuses so that those campuses could also seek grants and contracts in the name of the program. They would be responsible for administering those grants and contracts as well as any staff associated with them. The University of Montana would retain the existing project-based grants and contracts that they currently have, as well as all of the associated staff that work on those grants and contracts. We would want to have a contract with the University of Montana where we would continue to use about 30% of the core dollars to fund the time of the senior science staff to work on the core deliverables that they're currently working on. That would be more of a contract for deliverables where they're using their time to work on some of those core services like mediated requests and species rankings and that kind of core work. But again, a contract for deliverables rather than an overall contract for administration. We would negotiate with them on the overhead rate that the University of Montana is currently making available to the program. Again, in our meeting on the 22nd, OCHI seemed comfortable continuing that kind of agreement, and we would want to negotiate for what that rate would look like. Again, right now under the current funding model, the university contributes about 30% of those overhead dollars, and we would want to ensure that at least that amount continued in the future. We would want to negotiate with the university for the continued operation of the spatial analysis lab so that that lab can continue to operate at the university under the authority of the university. In exchange, we right now provide for the rent and the infrastructure for all of the Heritage Program staff that are housed here at the State Library, and would continue to do so for any staff that remain University of Montana staff that are housed here at the State Library in a reciprocal agreement with them. And then potentially in the future, there may be additional partners that we could create similar relationships with. In the long term, and this of course depends on future funds, we would then want to recruit for and hire a senior zoologist, senior botanist, and a senior ecologist that would be employees of the State Library working to ensure that all of the core services of the program were met, that we're working with the project-related staff at various university campuses to help ensure that the grants and contracts that might be entered into in the name of the program would continue to support and enhance the mission of the overall program. Under this scenario, as the State Library were to have additional funds, it would be up to us working with the program coordinator to prioritize how we would go about filling those senior positions based on what we know about available funding as well as different kinds of work priorities. So said in just a little bit different way, if you look at the funding, right now, of course, the University of Montana receives the core funding, the supplemental core funding, as well as various grants and contracts. Under the compromise scenario, we would keep the core funding here at the State Library and negotiate for the University of Montana to pass through that supplemental core to the State Library. Again, that's funding that's for the operation and administration of the program. But they would retain all of the grants and contract dollars that they currently have with various partners. We would not seek to transfer those grants and contracts. And then in the future, under an MOU with the university system, U of M and all of the other campuses would have the ability to seek grants and contracts in the name of the Heritage Program, with the understanding that the State Library would retain the data that's created and make it accessible through our administration and our current infrastructure. We would want to again negotiate for a portion of the overhead that's collected by those universities. The universities would continue to be responsible for the staff that are funded through those grants and contracts. And those employees of the Heritage Program that wanted to remain university employees would have the ability to do so. And again, we hope that we're able to negotiate an agreement for the continued operation of the spatial analysis lab. pause there and ask if there are any questions.
This is Bruce. I assume that this has been examined from a financial point of view in that the ship stays afloat across the passage.
Yes, yes.
That would be lovely.
The Finance Committee this morning reviewed with Melissa and staff both of the expenditures and revenue under this model, and it's not generating a lot of money for the program, but it does allow for it to be financially viable.
And the Finance Committee felt this was this would be a prudent way to proceed from a financial perspective. I'm not talking policy, I'm just saying.
Yep. I don't want to speak for the commissioners that were on the call, but.
The sense.
Jenny, this is Linda. I'd like to hear a little more about your thinking on how the decision-making strategic direction at the library would limit or affect what kinds of grants and contracts the university staff could seek in the name of the Heritage Program.
If you don't mind, Bruce has asked a question of the other commissioners. We'd like to have the commissioners have a chance to have a discussion, and then we'll get to staff questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Linda, but I just want to get a clear answer. The sense from the commissioners and staff who were had the finance meeting earlier today was that this wouldn't dig us a hole we couldn't get out of.
Bruce, are you asking? Are you asking about just the first step of moving the administrative staff to the state library? Are you asking about the financial viability of the first step?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. There are a few commissioners, and please, I would love for them to weigh in. But yes, so when we're looking at this incrementally, it will work across the board. But the first step is what we focused on today. And so that would be moving the manager of the Heritage Program, and also some of the information systems staff over. And so when you look at it, the program isn't going to make money, but we're not looking to make money, but it's not going to lose money. So it's extremely financially viable when we look at it with a microscope at the first increment. Then we would have, there is a long-term plan, but that would change as grants and contracts were negotiated. But yes, it would be financially viable, and in my opinion, advisable all the way through, but definitely the first step. Yes, that's what we looked at today. And I would love for Jamie and Kenning to weigh in on your question.
Yeah, Bruce, this is Kenning.
I agree with Ann. Go ahead, Kenning.
No, go ahead, Jamie.
I was just going to say I agree with Ann. I felt good about the discussion that we had today and how I think it keeps no harm.
Great. Thank you, Jamie.
And Bruce, this is Kenning. I agree also that this is a good step. And, I think we need to keep our eye on the long term. And for me, what's exciting about this is it potentially opens up additional revenue streams with contracts that other universities might get that currently really isn't there for the program.
Okay, good to hear. Thank you very much. And thank you again, Linda, I wanted to get those answers.
So this is Elsie. I have a question. I have not seen a pure finance document, and I wasn't on the call today, but is that available, Jenny?
That is available. It was reviewed by the Finance Committee. So if the Greater Commission wants to see that, we can make that available at your next meeting.
Okay, possibly a little bit ahead of time. Does it
sure.
discuss then the core funding as much as the supplemental funding and some of the questions I think that were brought up between staff as well in our previous meeting that we had on the 11th?
It does break down the various current funding streams, yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I think Linda had a question, right?
I did. And sorry, Bruce, I had a little blip in my phone for a second. I didn't realize that you had posed your question to all of the commissioners. I wouldn't have wanted to cut you off if I'd recognized that.
No, this is a tough format anyhow. No worries.
Okay, my question to you, Jenny, was, you know, I can certainly think of some people at the University of Montana and other places that I sure wouldn't want to have them applying for grants using the Montana Natural Heritage Program name. And so I'm wondering how you see that working. When you say that the decision-making strategic direction would remain at the library, this is under the 2021 biennium recommendation. When you see that the decision-making and strategic direction would remain at MSL, would that mean that there would be a sort of a final say on what kinds of grants those other entities or people belonging to those other entities could apply for in the name of the Heritage Program?
Yes, Linda, we would anticipate having some kind of signatory to those grants or contracts. And to be clear, I would want to involve the program coordinator as well as any of the senior science staff, having their feedback into what those grants and contracts should be that the university staff might be applying for.
And then put the other way, you know, because in this middle recommendation, the senior staff are still at the university, would the library have the authority to tell the senior staff what limitations there might be on the contracts and grants that they were seeking?
We would still want some kind of sign-off or oversight over what those grants and contracts would be.
Beyond what we already have with Bryce signing off?
In this case, the program coordinator would be a staff of the state library. So in that way, the state library would be signing off on those agreements.
Okay.
Are there other questions from commissioners?
Jenny, this is Elsie. When it comes to the MOU that will be created, will that be also reflective on the next step after this incremental approach is happening, or are we going to take that step by step? So in other words, this thing, the MOU will be specific for this and in that time period, and then there would be another one, or would this be an MOU that would be longer lasting? What is your vision? What do you think?
Sure. So I think there's a single larger MOU through the Office of Commissioner of Higher Ed for the university system that would essentially be a contract mechanism or vehicle that grants overarching authority to the affiliate campuses to enter into grants and contracts in the name of the program. So that would be a contract. Certainly we would want to have some kind of review period on it, but I hope would be a longer term, long lasting agreement. We would need to have a transition agreement with the University of Montana to start the transfer of the current staff as well as the supplemental core, and to arrange for that reciprocal relationship between the housing of the spatial analysis lab and housing of the employees that would be housed here at the state library. And that's something that we could negotiate as soon as possible. And then once those documents are in place and agreed to, begin the process to recruit the staff to fill the program coordinator and the information services staff. Again, as I told you in December, we don't have the authority or the ability to simply make that transfer. There has to be a recruitment process, but that would hopefully happen as soon as possible at the start of the next fiscal year in July. And then any future recruitment would of course be subject to availability of new funds to fund those positions.
So this is Bruce again. So if my understanding is correct, what is being proposed here would basically make the primary contact between, so the Heritage program would become a program of the state library administered fully by the state library. The state library's primary relationship with the university system would not be with any specific campus, but with the Commissioner for Higher Education. And then the Commissioner of Higher Education would have relationships with UM, MSU, fill in the blanks. The money, though, if you take a snapshot from right now, this wouldn't change the flow of money for a lot of the supplemental kinds of stuff. Those projects would continue forward. The FTEs, back to your concerns that you identified from your meeting with OCHI, the FTEs would remain with U of M that are currently there, and the flow of money would remain about the same through U of M. Is that correct?
Yes and no. So
okay,
the project dollars, those grants and contracts that are considered project dollars, and that's what funds the majority of the FTE, would remain at the University of Montana. But starting this next fiscal year, the program coordinator, the information services staff, we would recruit for those positions to be here at the state library. The core funding that we currently have would stay here at the state library to operate that. So those dollars wouldn't flow to the University of Montana.
Okay.
And we would work out an agreement to pass through the supplemental core funding to the state library.
But then projecting into the future, though, I mean, back to one of these diagrams that shows kind of core funding as sort of a horizontal, declining horizontal line, and the special project dollars kind of bouncing way the heck up, but moving around quite a bit. That wouldn't necessarily change one way or the other. It could get more, it could get less, but those would still be reflected by those partners that we had, U of M, MSU, but that would all be done through OCHI.
Yes, under an umbrella agreement. So while there might be a short-term loss of the core funding under this proposal, this still gives the university system the opportunity to continue to bring in more contract dollars in the future, and hopefully see that increase as other campuses also become involved in the program. I think that was something that OCHI seemed to be in favor of when we discussed that at our meeting on the 22nd. So a potential short-term decline in their overall dollars, but the potential for long-term increases both in staff and in project dollars.
And over the short term, the work of Heritage doesn't change one iota.
Right.
Over the long term, it might change depending on how the commission decides Heritage fits into the overall mission of the state library, which I presume again means no substantive change.
Right.
Because most of us think they're doing brilliant work already.
I would hope that the only substantive change that we would see would be more time focused on the core work, and then additional grants and contracts in the future that allow for more core deliverables to be met, as well as more value-added products and services.
Well, and between the spatial infrastructure, maybe a little bit more crosstalk.
Yep.
Thank you.
If I can interject, something that I recall from the meeting with OCHI was the beginning a discussion about a communication flow, how that would work, because it seems, you know, pretty daunting to be able to have different contracts with different universities. Oh, you know, if we were to join an umbrella contract with OCHI, but the commissioner didn't think that was daunting, and actually had some initial ideas and even very specific contacts right now for while we're in this process of how a communication flow would work, and that's something that we've been struggling with. So we began the process of addressing that problem already, you know, just in that one meeting, and right now we are in between contracts. So I feel like, you know, they understand the need for they understand the complexity that this could become more complex, and we need to have that foundation of how the communication flow will work. And they're already thinking about that, which I thought was great.
This is a good chart.
There's a couple of other benefits that we haven't had a chance to talk about with you. One is just the overall enhancement of the business office of the state library. Part of what we would plan to do by retaining the core funding here, and then including some of our Land Information Act funds and LSTA funds, which are used to manage various grants and agreements, would be to hire additional staff, including HR and contract staff, to help with this workload, but with the overall workload of the state library as well. You know, right now, staff spread across the agency have HR and hiring responsibilities, as well as procurement and contract management responsibilities that could be assigned to new staff within the business office, freeing up time and resources of our other staff. That would be a significant benefit to the overall agency. And then to Ann's point about improved communication with OCHI, one of the things we've really struggled with in the past is to have any kind of communication from OCHI that supports advocacy for the Heritage Program in the State Library. And we heard very strongly at that meeting that OCHI would be willing to advocate for and lobby on behalf of the Heritage Program. So that would be another benefit to improving this kind of overall communication. I do want to say, and I said this to OCHI as well, we don't put any blame on the university system or the University of Montana for sort of the loss of funding and erosion of core work over the last 15 years. But this proposal is really a recognition of the fact that it is the state library's responsibility to see to the health and the stability and the future of the program. And really that's what this proposal is all about. There are a lot of details and a lot of moving parts, but we have the statutory responsibility to ensure the future health of this program. And you know, we have grave concerns about that future at this point. And I hope that the commission will agree that making the administrative change, while again it's not a silver bullet, is the necessary first step in the state library taking responsibility to address these concerns.
Another way of looking at that is, you know, we are charged by statute for operating the Natural Heritage Program. And what we've done is we've allowed the you know, make decision making and strategic direction, grants, contracts, you know, hiring, you know, all of that stuff to go to the University of Montana. And while I'm grateful for their assistance in the last decade or decade and a half in doing that, this is a state library program, and if we're going to run it, we should run it. currently, it could be argued that we are acting contrary to statute, although there's considerable wiggle room for contracting built into statute.
So Jenny and commissioners, this is Elsie. You know, we've been talking a lot about the stability and the long-term viability of the Natural Heritage Project. We're Montana State Library commissioners first. So I guess my question then is directed to you, Jenny, and possibly to staff, because this will be, you know, if this is through administration at this point, and in the long-term mode, more staffing changes, more will be added onto your plate. So just wanting to know, I know this is gonna, and I think an incremental approach is much better than taking it all at once. Just because of the viability in, you know, in 17, when we had a lot of challenges with staffing and budget. I just want to know, you know, if we're looking for stability of that program, of the Heritage Program, we ultimately have to make sure that it's stability for the State Library. And I guess those are the assurances that I also need. And again, it comes back to budget. It comes back to a direction that this is going to be more of a undertaking for the State Library.
Yeah. Elsie, like I said, we can provide financial documents for you for your meeting, but we've looked very seriously at the staffing needs that we would need here at the State Library, as well as the financial viability. Melissa is very, very conservative in her budget analysis and in her estimating. And as you heard from the commissioners, they're on at the Finance Committee meeting. We don't have any concerns about the financial viability. And if we staff properly for the administration, then I don't have any concerns about the overall operation. And in fact, I think it would have a positive impact on the workload for the entire State Library.
And if I could add, you know, one of our charges in statute is to administer this program. So I don't see us as being State Library Commissioners first. I mean, we are State Library Commissioners, but this is a statutory obligation that we have. So if it means that we have more work, then that's in statute that we have more work. But the flip side of that is also this careful planning process has resulted in a plan that would increase efficiency in the program, which is also one of our, it's not stated in statute, but I think it's a shared goal that we have.
I agree. Jamie.
I've said before that I think that the Heritage Program is one of the gems in the state, and the more we can do to basically to let the light from the gems shine, to use that information as charged by statute for the good of us all, both agencies and also all Montanans, the better off we are. And I think this does provide an opportunity to unleash some of the data information that is always room for improvement and letting it get out. I think the field guide is brilliant, and I would just like to see that on everyone's phone.
Jenny, do you have more that you're going to share, or should I call for? If not, then I'm going to call for further discussion with the commissioners, and then I'm going to do public comment. Is that, or do you have more before that?
I don't, Ann.
Okay. So do we have any other further discussion amongst the commissioners? Questions or comments?
This is Ken Wall. I don't have any questions. I just want to commend everybody there for, you know, making this happen and beginning this process. I feel much more comfortable. It's not, you know, taking care of all of my concerns, but the vast majority, I very much am supportive of this, and I'm very supportive of the Natural Heritage Program and our statutory obligations for that. And I think it's great work, everybody, and I really am supportive of the process.
Thank you, Ken.
Erin, did you have any questions or anything you'd like to say or add?
No, I'm grateful for the additional work that you guys did going to Ochi, and it's a lot of stuff to think about, and I'm really just grateful that we've had the ability to get more information.
Do any of the commissioners have anything else before we move on to public comment?
I'd like to hear public comment.
Yeah. You ready for that part? Okay.
And I'm ready for that part, but I would also like to say that I have a lot of appreciation for the work that went into this, and sitting down with Ochi and the staff questions, and there's a lot, as Erin said, there's a lot of work that has gone into this, and I just want the staff and the people who have been interested to know that I appreciate their participation and their comments.
Thanks, Jamie. Okay. So if we could go into unless another commissioner has a comment or question, we'll go into the public comment period. And so what we're going to do is if everyone could try to limit their public comment to 3 minutes, if the commissioners could allow for everyone who wants to give public comment, if we could hold our questions for those for the people who comment until the end, that would be extremely helpful. And so then we could hear all of the public comment and then go back and ask questions and discuss further. So I'd like to, at this point, open the floor to public comment.
I don't know if I have comments, but I have a bunch of questions. Maybe I could list them out.
This is Bryce.
Yeah, this is Bryce Maxwell, sorry. The timing of the intermediate step, is that July of 2020?
Yes.
Okay. The finance, would we get to see more on the finance study in terms of one way we keep the program coordinator position and the finance and grants administrator position afloat is through SPAVA funding, which is university accounts. It's not supplemental core. It's not clear to me how the supplemental core would get redirected, and then separate from that, how the SPAVA funding, which is at the university, would get redirected in order to cover the staff that we're proposing to bring in July of 2020. That's another question. This may actually fall a little bit under a comment, but I think it's commendable to go after full funding for all of the science staff. And I've certainly testified to this in front of the legislature, and that is, I'm not sure that's a good idea from the perspective of if you have someone who is, their motivating forces in their workflow are to sit and not interact with others. I would want some sort of mechanism within their job description that would make them understand and work with partners on what the partners are facing, what information needs they have. So I can imagine a scenario where you would have a science person come in and they're really interested in some esoteric animal or plant group, and they're working away on that plant or animal group, but they're not really addressing the key needs of partners. So just wanted to note that. I could see going after full funding and then splitting it into 2 positions. I could argue very strongly that, the mission of our program, and we talk about this with staff who are stressed out, there are career lifetimes worth of work to be done, to bring us up to our mission goal. And, if we could split funding between 2 botanists and they both went after funding that partially supported those positions, I could see that. Just a thought there. It's not clear to me how the university system could apply for funding under the name of the Heritage Program and what the guideposts on that would be. I could see that as a good benefit to the university system under this. And by the way, I want to say that I really like the idea of a broader understanding or agreement with the university system as a whole. I think that is very beneficial to the program. I think that covers my questions that come up.
This is Kay Hajek. I just have I'm going to keep it to just 3, I guess they're a combination of question and comments. So the first thing is that my previous comments have focused a lot on administrative hurdles that make it difficult for me to high quality work and really come through with high quality deliverables. I don't know that this presentation kind of addresses a lot of those things. One thing that I have a concern about that maybe could be answered is that right now what I see in the proposal is that whereas the vast majority of my sort of administrative responsibility is dealing through University of Montana, this looks to me like there would be a layer with the state, a layer with the University of Montana in the near future, and then potentially another layer with other universities that we work with. So, and I'm just thinking about like someone like Darlene has to interact with University of Montana folks regarding grant administration, and then it's going to be a complete different set of people at MSU or whoever else. That adds a lot of layers of complexity. To me, just looking at it without any further information, it looks like it's going to interfere with it. And along those lines too, I just want to say out loud that it's really concerning to me that right when my field season starts this summer that our administrators are going to be like migrating to a new system. So July 2020, if Darlene is, applying for a job and starting a new position, just what happens in the midst of that, right during the time when I have to collect data. So that's one thing. The other thing I just wanted to say is it would be really helpful, I think at some point for someone to really strongly define what core work means. A lot of the projects that we work on, I think, are focused on the core work or core mission. And I just want to reiterate, I think this program is a gem also, and that it's a gem regionally, not just within the city. And the fact that it's a gem regionally has to do with the fact that we do projects and partner with other heritage programs. And just to keep that in mind as we move further in terms of like who regards what is core work, a really good definition of core work, especially in terms of what our partners see as core work, because I think all the work that we do is really important for the partner. I think that's true now, and I think that, it should continue. But that administrative piece, like I'm really nervous about that, those layers and how it's going to continue to function and us be able to continue to do projects and continue to do that well. That's gonna affect the shininess of our gem. So, thanks.
Kay, I'm sorry to break my own rule, but I'm just doing it because and talking, but I'm just doing it because I didn't hear the second one very well. You said something, I didn't catch it all. I heard migrating in July 2020.
Yeah, so
can you fill that in?
If our administrative staff like Darlene and Lindsay are going to, if their positions are going to change in July of 2020, which is in a few months, that's right during my field season when the busiest season that I have that requires a lot of input from those staff members. So it really makes me nervous regarding these current projects that we have, because they're pretty big projects. And that, that doesn't just affect ecology. I think, that just affects any of the portions of the science programs that are working this summer. So I know Dan has some projects also that require Darlene's attention.
Thank you for repeating.
Sure.
Sorry.
Can I say one more thing? I'm sorry. I just keep hearing from the commissioners that there's this feeling that project work is something that's something to be avoided. I just, that it's a negative. I just want to reiterate what Bryce said regarding, I really think any scientist worth their salt is going to be invigorated by going out and seeking new projects and seeking new, whether it's partnerships or money or whatever, just to keep that in mind. That's a part of my job that I love. And I think Linda would probably agree with that, and I think Jess would too. I would ask Stan to speak to himself and Andrea too, but you can chat with them about that individually, but I get that feeling from them too, that it's invigorating to them. So just to keep that in mind, thanks.
Since Kay brought it up, I wanted to actually harken on to this. I think some of the administrative hurdles that we talked about in the past are still not addressed. I just wanted to say that as well. I feel the same way, that we want to make sure things like pro cards that are different than what are currently done in the state library. I think we would just have to. The state library would need to recognize that our staff really are different than GIS folks that are kind of stationary in terms of what they need to do their jobs. So I think we just want to make sure we address those.
What is a pro card?
Pro card is a credit card that you would buy something with in the field if you needed it. So let's say you're out in Forsyth doing some bat mist netting, and your bat detector breaks. You got to go to the hardware store, buy some soldering equipment to fix it. You're not purchasing that out of your personal pocket. You can put it on your pro card and have it
It's
accounted for.
university's purchasing system, basically, which we've talked about before. It's the university purchasing system is really streamlined, and it works really well for people that do the type of work that we do. And yeah, again, I haven't seen, I appreciate the work that's gone into this, but it doesn't address a lot of the sort of nuts and bolts and details that I have concerns about administratively.
And I don't know if it'd be helpful if I took a few minutes to answer their questions, or if there's other public comment.
Could we let's call for other public comment and then finish the public comment and then answer the questions. Okay. Who's next?
Well, while we're waiting for somebody to be next, Dan, this is Linda Vance again. I just wanted to say that I do agree with what Kay said about the necessity of scientists going after projects. It's a way that we reach out to our partners. It's a way we find what our partners are doing. It's the way that we collaborate with our partners. And I think that there would be a real problem recruiting good professional scientists for the Heritage program if they were 100% core funded and did not have the opportunity to pursue things that might be a little bit more cutting edge and a little bit more experimental, the sort of things that we can do with our partners. So that's, I just think that's an important thing to keep in mind.
And also gets at sort of their science chops.
Are there any further public comments? Would anybody else like to offer public comment?
The last thing I just had a question too. I still don't see that this proposal I don't see the connection between this proposal and an increase in core funding, like a direct connection between those two things. So then we could talk about that, and if there is, or if this is still sort of something in the future that may occur.
It's hard to hear you. Can you step closer
Yeah,
to the
sure. I was just saying, I still am not clear in this proposal how it addresses that this proposal in any way directly impacts an increase in core funding. So if you could just address that and let me know how anything that's been proposed here would result directly in an increase in core funding for the program.
Okay. All right. Is anybody who hasn't yet given public comment wishing to give public comment? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to turn it back over to Jenny. Was interested in going through and answering some of the questions and responding to some concerns.
Thanks, Anne. I took notes, so if I missed something, let me know. Starting with some of Bryce's questions, we'll prepare the finance information that the Finance Committee reviewed this morning so that people can have a chance to look at the core, supplemental core, and project dollars. I think it's important to recognize that we don't budget and account for funding and pay personal services in the same way the university does, and we wouldn't expect to then fund all the positions exactly the same way now. We're looking at overall dollars coming into the state library and in the state library's budget, and then allocating those funds across all of the positions. So there wouldn't necessarily be a one-to-one relationship between the percent of funds that are core and supplemental core and project for current staff under the university and how they would be funded under the state library's budget. So that would certainly be a change, and I hope a benefit for the program coordinator, because we wouldn't have to be managing that. We have a business office to concern themselves with how the staff are funded. We would want to negotiate for a transfer of the funds in those university accounts, those SPABA funds that have already been earmarked for the program to come over to support the program here. That's something that we would negotiate with the university in this transition. With regard to the full funding versus project funding, Kay, I want to say very clearly that we too value project dollars. Please don't think we don't. Nothing in this proposal is intending to diminish that work. But it does create an imbalance when such a majority of the project dollars and the stability of the program are reliant on project dollars rather than the core funds, and we're hoping to even that out. And we think there's going to continue to be an even more enhanced opportunity to do that as we think about opportunities for additional grants and contracts across the university system. We only want those kinds of opportunities to grow. Whether or not the senior science staff should be involved in seeking grants and contracts or be 100% funded doesn't have to be decided today. In an ideal world, we would have 100% funding for all of our staff. And even if we have 100% funding, that doesn't preclude them from seeking grants and contracts. We have state library staff right now. Troy Blandford is a great example of a water information system manager who is 100% funded with general fund, who spends a significant amount of time on grants and contracts. And that frees up general fund for us to do other things with when he's working on those grants and contracts. He leads a water information work group that keeps him connected and tied into the needs of our partners. And that would absolutely be expected of the program coordinator and the senior science staff in the same way we expect that of all of our other state library staff. And I would hope that those senior science staff would be in close communication with any university staff that were also seeking grants and contracts to make sure that focus of the work does enhance the priorities of the program, so that we don't have a botanist that's working on some obscure plant that may not be of value. But those are the kinds of opportunities that this proposal addresses, that gives the state library comfort in ensuring that the focus of the program is administered effectively and that continues to enhance the mission of the program. We would want to line out those guideposts, as you said, Bryce, with the university system, but specifically we need to ensure that the university system would understand that if they're applying for grants and contracts in the name of the program, that the program retains the data, that the data is the entity, the legal entity to manage any resulting data, that they would be responsible for administering the staff that are funded through those grants and contract, that they would pass back overhead to ensure the administration of the program. And as I said earlier, OCHI said that they would continue to lobby in support of the program. We would want the university partners to be involved in partners meetings and involved in any kind of work groups or other kinds of discussion groups that are helping to inform the overall work of the program. Those are some of the guideposts that we would have in place with the university system for them to do that work. Sign off from the program coordinator.
Just a clarification question regarding, so are you suggesting that there would be an opportunity for anyone associated with, say, University of Montana to apply for grants in our name, in the heritage name, without one of us as the PI in those grants? Why wouldn't, how does that help us? I guess is my question.
I think that's a point to negotiate with the vice president for research and us to make sure that it does enhance the program. I would see the senior science staff having sign off on those grants and contracts. And again, right now, because we don't have full funding for those positions would stay at the university. Kay, please correct me if I'm not wholly understanding your concern about layers of complexity and the administration. Under this proposal, all current project grants and contracts stay at the university. So we're not changing any of the administrative complexity
what about
at all.
The next step into the future, the long-term step, where we're MSL employees?
So only those senior science staff would be hired as employees of the state library. Any staff wholly working on grants and contracts would remain an employee of whatever affiliate campus would hire them. All of the administration of those grants and contracts, all of the recruitment of field workers, field staff, the need for pro cards for field work, that's all handled at the university level, and it would not transfer to the state library at all.
Yeah, I guess I still don't. So for instance, I'm the PI on the grant, and this is long term, so I'm at MSL now, and that grant is through the University of Montana. Everyone that I hire, I understand, would be a university employee. But in terms of me, my piece of making sure that grant works, I'm going to have to do the purchasing. I'm going to have to do the hiring. Do you see what I'm saying? Like I'm not a university employee, but I'm.
So it would depend on the grant. If you were an MSL employee, you would, and it was determined that some amount of work on a grant or contract should be subcontracted to U of M, for example. You would subcontract that work to the university, and the university would be responsible for administering the subcontract, and the work would be through a contractual vehicle. You would not be expected to, unless you wanted to, or unless the grant called for it, manage that level of administrative detail through the state library. If it was appropriate, you would subcontract that to the university. In the same way, for example, right now we have an agreement with the NRCS that we subcontract to the Heritage Program through the Spatial Analysis Lab. We don't have any say at all over how that work is administered, the staff that are assigned to it, who is recruited to do the work. That's 100% delegated through a subcontract to the university.
Yeah, and I guess it's what I'm asking is a little bit different than that. Just that, you know, currently when I am working on a grant that's through the University of Montana, because I'm an employee, I am able to do the purchasing, hiring directly through the university, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm no longer an employee of the university, how does that work for me to still be able to be the project lead?
Were you to become a state library employee?
Well, she wouldn't. Under your proposal, you wouldn't. You would be university, in your current position, you would be university.
Yeah, I am. Okay,
right?
so let's pretend I'm Linda. Let's pretend we're talking about Linda. Linda becomes a Montana State Library employee. Is she still able to, is she the PI on the grant?
I think it would depend on the grant, but in all likelihood, there would be a senior ecologist signing off on this agreement here and subcontracting to a PI at the university who's responsible for administering it at the university.
Okay.
And there wouldn't be, you mentioned layers of complexity adding in other affiliate campuses. A senior staff person at the state library could subcontract to MSU, and U of M and MSU could be working on complementary grants and contracts, but not necessarily the same. So there wouldn't be any kind of layering complexities.
It is a little bit complex. I'm just saying, if we keep pretend that this is several years from now, and we have retained the same staff, so that Linda is a MSL employee and I'm a University of Montana employee. It sounds like she has to name me as the PI of that grant in order to. Is that right? So she can't do it directly. She can't manage any of these projects directly.
She could. She could. Yeah.
Okay.
She could.
It
would be up to.
Sorry.
Yeah, and this is getting into hypotheticals that I'm not sure are helpful, but
Jenny, I don't think we're necessarily getting into hypotheticals here. I think there's a very real critical question here about the responsible conduct of research. And the idea that any of us would apply for a grant and then subcontract it to somebody at the university really goes beyond those guidelines, those federal guidelines for the responsible conduct of research. If I can't administer that contract, if I can't oversee that contract, if I shouldn't have any authority for it at all.
What we are
do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yes, but what we are also saying is, while the state library staff could apply for grants and contracts, and that's certainly true, we are also, through this umbrella agreement with OCHI, delegating that authority to the various campuses. So any employee who chose to remain an employee of a university could apply for those grants and contracts as a university employee, be the PI on those grants and contracts through this umbrella agreement. And a state library staff person, I would want a state library staff person, the program coordinator and senior science staff to say, yes, we agree that this kind of work will enhance the mission of the program. We've heard from partners and we know that this will address a partner need, and it makes sense for the concerns that you're raising for U of M to have to apply for this grant or contract and be the PI on it, or MSU to be the PI on a grant or contract. And the only thing that would happen in that case is, under the umbrella agreement, overhead from that university would flow back to help support the administration of the program. And the state library would be hands-off in how the deliverables of the contract were met.
But if the deliverables were not met under the name of the Heritage Program, we would have no recourse. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the responsible conduct of research. that we have no authority under this plan to go after that PI who decides to take a job with some other university. You know, there's an ultimate responsibility here, and we would have our name on it without the authority to make sure that it was executed in the interest of our partners and in accordance with the principles of science. This just scares me as a scientist.
And I guess you're addressing one of the concerns that I have right now about the program. We have the statutory responsibility and zero input into those kinds of grants and contracts. Again, we're talking about an umbrella agreement with OCHI that would ensure that the universities, whatever university campus is signing on to take this grant and contract, is responsible to completing the deliverables. And that's absolutely something you would want to have in an agreement with OCHI, and I think OCHI would take very, very seriously.
But does this mean that any scientist at MUS, any would be any new PhD can decide that they want to apply for a contract under the Heritage Program umbrella, and we'll be under pressure from OCHI to let them do it?
I can't speak for OCHI, but I can say that, again, we would want sign off on those agreements. And I would look to the senior staff and the program coordinator to say whether or not that agreement seems viable and meets the mission of the program, and that the affiliate campus has the ability to meet the terms of the deliverables.
Jenny, I had a follow-up question that I don't know, may or may not add to this. Long-term, in your mind, what are you thinking of for long-term with the bottom step for the senior zoologist, senior ecologist, and senior botanist?
There really is no time frame because to the other point, it depends on funding. Okay. And I hope that through our advocacy with the legislature, with now additional advocacy from OCHI, that we will have the ability to increase the amount of core funds that come to the program. I can't put a guarantee on that.
So related to that is, well, two questions related to the financial analysis. With the info services staff being brought in July of 2020, did that include the biological data systems coordinator position, which is right now empty, or would that position stay empty?
I assume you're talking about Karen.
Karen Coleman.
Yes,
yep.
that would include that position.
It would include that position. Okay, and then the other side of that with financial analysis is, would that strip funding away from the science staff core funding that we currently provide to them? That includes continuing to kind of give them the same. Okay.
Exactly. Yes. Kay, you asked about migrating the administrative staff. One of the reasons why we've been wanting to get this proposal moving forward is so that we could get that administration up and running as soon as possible, so it's not happening in July. But again, all of the administrative tasks from recruitment to purchasing on the existing grants and contracts would happen through the university. None of that would transfer and shouldn't impact your field season at all.
But our liaison through the university, who's Darlene, right, is her job is going to be changing significantly during that.
If she chooses to apply for a position here.
Whoever that is. So it's either, I don't know if she doesn't choose to, that's even more makes me even more nervous because it's a brand new person.
But she could choose to stay at the university, and then it wouldn't change at all.
I would like to interject on that one because Jenny, I see how that you're going down the question list in order. We've had public comment, and now Jenny's answering each question that we heard from public comment. And then after Jenny finishes with her list, I'd like to open it to the other commissioners to ask questions that they have. But if I may interject, that one, that comment that you offered, Kay, that resonated with me personally, as far as the migrating either personnel or duties on July 1. It happens to me every year. I mean, July 1 is the beginning of the fiscal year, so that's when changes are going to be implemented. And that's good for a lot of university staff. So I don't think it's, they have to do it on a day, and that is the first day of the fiscal year. But teaching summer school, I'm always impacted greatly by the changes in duties and personnel on that day because I'm trying to get people licensed with the OPI. So it always creates trouble with me and communication with the OPI. So that July 1 date is always problematic with people changing jobs and people changing duties. And I think that it's, I appreciate, that you sensitized us to that. It's something that I'm sensitive to, but it's I don't know that everyone is sensitive to the fact that that's when universities make big changes. And so as we're planning, I think we need to be very sensitive about that date and very, very thoughtful about the kinds of changes that are going to be happening on that date, and to make sure that we're not adding stress where there is already inherent stress.
Thanks, Ann. So, yeah, I mean, the beginning of the new fiscal year is a pain in the butt no matter when that beginning is. It's the
right.
But yeah, I was nodding and understanding as you were speaking.
Okay. So Jenny, if you would like to finish going down your list in responses to the initial public comment, and then I would like to open it up to other commissioners to ask questions or follow-ups.
Well, I think that the other questions were largely about us viewing projects as a negative, and as I said, that's absolutely not the case. But I think what we've tried to say all along is that we want to have a better, more secure balance between the core work and the project work. I completely agree that the project work allows the Heritage Program and the State Library to continue to be responsive to our partners' needs. And that is inherently the most important thing that we as a library do. I believe that we can have in the future full funding for the senior science positions. That doesn't preclude them from working on grants and contracts in the future. But again, it'll make sure that they don't have to be beholden to those grants and contracts. So I don't want to give any kind of impression that we see that as a negative. You asked about a direct increase in core funding, and as I've said, this does not in any way ensure an increase in the core funding. It does have, we hope, the ability to increase revenue through additional grants and contracts, thereby increasing overhead across the university system, something that would be a benefit to the university system and the program in the future. And then again, we heard strong support from OCHI at the meeting that they would be there to support advocacy for the overall program. You asked about the administrative questions and concerns for those information services and program coordinator staff. They would be responsible to the policies of the state library, but for any grant or contract work and employees working on grants and contracts, that would all be subject to the same administration as is the case right now with the University of Montana, and wouldn't change at all. We wouldn't want to impact that in any way.
But in the long term, the senior zoologist or the senior ecologist cannot act as a PI on a grant that's administered through the university. Is that a good summary of that conversation that you and Linda and I were having?
I think so. I think I understand what you're saying. Yes.
Okay. Do you understand why we keep needling you about that? That we're functionally, that's still removing this huge avenue of project work that we have if we can't act as if the senior person can't act as the PI on the types of grants that you can get by being associated with the university. It sounds like the spatial analysis lab can do that, right? They remain, yeah.
Yep.
And there's no way to finagle this
so I think maybe a point that I'm not getting across is that one of the concerns we have right now is that so much of the senior staff's time is spent on these projects and not on the core work. And you raised the point about core work and defining the core work. The core work is really everything in red right now practically on the report on the work that's being conducted. You know, it's being able to do the species rankings and the ecological systems rankings. We still prioritize mediated requests, but we know we could do a lot more in that way if we had the funding to do that. Those are the kinds of work that would be prioritized for the senior staff, continuing to promote the program, enhance those relationships through trainings and that kind of thing with partners, not spending the bulk of their time as PIs on projects. So I understand that there are scientists and academics who would prefer that the bulk of their time be spent doing that kind of project work. And this proposal also allows for that because those staff can continue to work in a university if that's what they want to do. And that's something that we would absolutely encourage. And I think OCHI would encourage as well.
Jenny, I'd just like, for the benefit of the commissioners, I would just like to give a little bit of historic context to this. You know, the commissioners have heard, this is Linda, of course, the commissioners have heard me say several times that I have absolutely not 1 cent of core funding, and that's really quite true. And we all know that I'm the one who goes after the bulk of the grants and holds the bunch of the most of them right now. But there is a particular reason for this, which is that, you know, for those of you who are new and don't know, until 2 years ago, I guess, I was both the senior ecologist and the director of the spatial analysis lab in Missoula. And at the point that I foolishly thought that I was going to retire, we made a decision to recruit for my position. It wasn't immediately popular. Nobody seemed to either want to take on both roles or have the kind of unusual background that would allow them to take on both roles. And so the position that was one position with some core funding was split into two. And the spatial analysis lab director took what core funding had previously been available for the ecologist. Now, at that point, what Bryce asked me to do was to see if I could build up an inventory and monitoring program to sort of flesh out the role that the senior ecologist, the Helena-based senior ecologist would have, so that position would have enough funding to pass it on to somebody else when I do for real retire, which eventually will happen. And so that's really what we've been working on. And that's what's a lot of what's behind this recent push to get much more funding, particularly from the BLM, particularly for inventory and monitoring, is to establish ourselves in that inventory and monitoring workspace so that in coming years, as more and more of the BLM offices in Montana move toward these contractual agreements for assessment, inventory, and monitoring, we'll be the people who are best situated to do it. So it's true to say that the ecology program right now is completely reliant on contracts and grants, but there is a strategic direction behind that, and I just want to make sure that the commissioners understand that and get that in historical perspective.
And I just want to say we're not trying to be a pain in the butt. This proposal does represent a significant change in the way a lot of us do work, and so I just am trying to understand it and think about how that's going to function in the future too.
So I'm not clear on what the significant changes are.
Well, I mean, under this proposal, what you're sort of, as it is now, the senior ecologist, like Linda is the big brain of what's going on in ecology, right? Like in our little world. And I don't understand how in this is essentially a new position. It's going to be a person who is primarily focusing on what you've said, not project work, right? Different work than project work. So that person doesn't then have any sort of vision in terms of what is going on in the project end. So like forming new relationships with partners, seeing what it is they need from us, collaborating with them to get them the data that they need to make good decisions in the field. That piece of it seems like it's not a part of the senior ecologist job anymore. But I just am super unclear on if the senior ecologist can't really pursue these projects through university, like through the university as the PI. I'm not clear on who's doing that then. Like why does that even exist as part of the heritage program anymore? If it's not the senior ecologist or zoologist or botanist as sort of the PI, so to speak. These I don't understand who at the university it has any need to pursue a grant through our program if it's none of us basically. Certainly, there's no faculty member that needs to use our credentials to pursue work. Do you know what I mean? And I actually don't even see why now at this moment why if Linda wanted to work on a grant with somebody at MSU, there's no reason why she couldn't do that now. So I guess I don't see how I see this as changing the positions, especially for science staff. I'm not really sure how it's going to shake out. I do think that it's a significant difference from how things work now. And I'm just trying to, these questions are just me trying to understand from your perspective what those changes are. Yeah. So does that make sense? What it's new information to me, so I'm not articulating it very well.
I think it does make sense. I think one of the things I would want to say to you and to Linda is really your work doesn't change. It shouldn't change. If there is a senior ecologist who isn't Linda, and I wouldn't want that, but Linda said that she wouldn't apply for a position here at the state library. So
or she may retire in a year.
Yeah, so that's her choice. If there's a senior ecologist here at the state library, that person works with all of our partners and works with any staff at the university campuses to really have an eye and an ear out to what the ecological information needs are, that becomes an advocate back to the program coordinator and the state library and the state library commission to say that, yes, this grant that this person at the university wants to go after will enhance the program in this way, and then continue to be an advocate and a kind of a bridge between all of the partners for all of the work that can go on throughout the university system. It's sort of that point person. I used Troy Blanford as an example earlier in the same way that Troy's position does that for our water information system work.
But Jenny, I'm just thinking this is not really well thought out. So let's say, for example, I decide that I'm not going to apply for the senior ecologist position because I really don't want to be a library-bound data manager. And so I stay at the university and I say, okay, I want to go after this contract and that contract, and I have to deal with some, I'm not that respectful. I'm some paper pusher. Senior ecologist at the library says, no, I don't really want you to go after that. And I say, okay, I don't need the Montana Natural Heritage Program name. I got my own name. I got my own staff. I got my own history. I'm going to go after it. I'm going to go after it as an employee of the university. And the next thing you know, the senior staff from the formerly known as the Heritage Program are in direct competition with the Heritage Program. This is not how any of us want it to end up.
That's the piece I'm trying to articulate. So right now, as things, if this were long-term and senior ecologist was MSL and my position is University of Montana, the reason why this functions now is because Linda and I collaborate like very seriously and have a similar vision and work well together. The next step is after this round of funding is over, we have a new senior ecologist. Linda retires. It's somebody else who isn't, interested in pursuing the same types of things as say I am or whoever would be in my position. Why would there be any interaction? I think that's kind of my point. It works now really well because there's two people who are really interested in doing that, but like there's no real connection between the university and MSL under this format. Do you see what I'm saying? There's no.
I guess I see what you're saying, but I also just disagree that there's no connection.
I'd like to, this is Rats, I'd like to ask a question that I think might clarify something for me anyways. We're talking about the core mission and statute that we have, these deliverables, and there's a lot of items in red that we haven't gotten done or gotten to. And part of the idea is to bring in core funded positions that would be able to address those back items, classifying ranks, going through and fleshing out worst species or whatever on the field guide. I don't necessarily know if that's the job that that core person would be doing 8 hours a day. We might find somebody that can handle the spiders, and we can contract them to flesh out the spider part of the field guide. Or it could be a junior scientist who's going to study the rankings on a certain species of frog or whatever. And it sounds to me like we're almost getting confused in saying the senior ologist is the one that's going to be doing the work of just that core deliverable. And I don't necessarily see that. I see it as having money for that and having that system director person be able to contract or work on different things to do that. But I don't necessarily think that that senior ologist position is turned into a data manager, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. Yeah.
It totally is, Rex. You know, because in the end, Troy Blanford, who we've all been talking about, is not a hydrologist, is not a geomorphologist, is not going out and studying streams, is not doing any work to look at stream flow permanence. Troy is a GIS specialist. This is what you're going to end up with these core positions under, no, I shouldn't say this is what you're going to end up with. I don't want to make predictions. If I could do that, I could be rich. This is what concerns me. This is what I'm afraid of, that the way that this is structured without the ability to do research and to collaborate with other researchers, that these positions will eventually become relatively hollow, and that you won't have the kind of academic clout that we have now, the academic and professional clout that we have now. So it's a caution. It's not a threat. It's my concern. I care about the Heritage Program. I may never retire, although I may not be with the Heritage Program. I may never retire, but I don't want to see the Heritage Program lose its stature, and I don't want to see the library lose its stature. This really concerns me, this proposal.
It really does have to do with, just going back, I really like that analogy of the gem. I mean, I just really want to put forth that the type of people that occupy those positions are, right, like, able to do the work and the supervisory work, the visionary work, the project work, the person who can figure out who the right person is to do the data work, right? Like, I don't want that position to get watered down. I feel like those are the things that feed into this program being really strong and really well respected. And I really like that idea that funding really has to do with having the funding to hire someone to be able to do that work, and not necessarily having the seniorologist doing the work.
Because that is the exact point that I am making. That is the exact.
So you do see these roles as changing significantly then.
The senior science staff, because so much of their time right now is spent doing the project work, they don't have the time and resources to do this other higher level coordination work and all of the data management and all of that.
Well, the higher level coordination work is different than the person who's taking care of the spiders on the field, right?
You know, I had a conversation with Bryce a few weeks ago, and he mentioned that they might be needing to hire an entomologist, and I asked, can we contract for that? And he said, yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I guess I hear two different things though, Jenny. I hear that you want that person focused on doing the nitty gritty of the data management, but also the sort of higher level.
I don't think they would ever do the nitty gritty of the data management. They are the subject matter experts that inform how the data is managed.
But that's not really a researcher position, is what we're saying.
It wouldn't necessarily have to be an in the field researcher position. It, you know, is the subject matter expert that identifies the need to seek funding, and you know, maybe it's a direct partnership with the university where the university is going after the grant or contract work to fulfill that deliverable back, or maybe it's funding that flows through the state library through a subcontract with someone at one of the affiliate campuses to do the work. But that person becomes sort of the point person for identifying those needs, having relationships, important relationships with staff at the university, to make sure that where that kind of research work is going on, that there really is a solid, strong relationship, ensuring the effective flow of information that ultimately serves our partners and our patrons.
The staff at the university that can do that work is our staff, is Montana Natural Heritage staff. It's not the kind of work that gets done by faculty researchers, and that's why the Natural Heritage Program is so important to conservation, because those folks don't pay attention to the type of work we do at this level. Do you know what I mean? Like, so the staff at the university that would do that work is me or Jess or Claudine or whoever it might be. Those positions are, you know, associated with the Natural Heritage Program.
And the only reason that would have to change is if the university said so.
Right.
We're not asking for that to change at all.
You do see that this taking the step away for the person who's in charge of the program area, not being associated with the rest of that staff is worrisome. Do you see that? Do you, like the fact that they can't actually have any direct involvement in these grants as the principal investigator?
I don't understand why you know, a coordinating person can't be working very closely with a project investigator who's in a university staff. That doesn't make sense to me.
Is there
the person? Okay, I know why. I know why.
Is there a need to professionally? Is there a need to have your name on a project to keep your status professionally?
To keep your status professionally? No.
Is that part of the reason that PI is important?
My concern is that.
Is that part of what we're getting at?
That being a PI is important?
Is it important for your professional status as a scientist to have your name appear as the PI on certain projects?
It probably depends on the. Yeah, I don't know.
Yes.
I mean, like it does for.
Yes,
it definitely
it's important.
does for.
So in the library world, it works a little bit different. We publish papers, we give speeches, we run for president, you know. But I mean, it's it's a little bit different. So I think that may be some of the rub right there. There's like part of what the Heritage Program is doing is that it's a research institute in part, and I can't. Sorry, but you know, statute says we're supposed to build a natural heritage information system, and the state library is in charge of running it. And so we need those. I think those are the two holes that we need to reconcile. Does that make sense to you, Bryce? Okay, sorry. It just came to me as a.
Can I add two comments or a question and a comment? I think what this centers around is moving forward with your long-term discussions is setting those guideposts that make sure that when you recruit 30 years from now, you will get the appropriate person that is going to have the appropriate motivations. But they'll have both the appropriate credentials, and they'll have both the appropriate forces that will ensure that they work with partners. So I think that, to me, it's just that needs to be fleshed out.
Yeah. This is Anne. Oh, I'm sorry, Bryce.
No, you're
no,
good.
No, I agree. We've had some extensive public comment, and Jenny has replied extensively. I think that for some of these things, it's the beginning of some further conversations that will happen at a future date. For right now, I would like to call on the other commissioners and ask if they have any questions or comments for anybody who has submitted public comment today?
Just a teeny note, we're required by statute to work closely with other states. So it's not an option. Statute says it clearly.
Great.
And in fact, as you know,
To work closely with other states. Is that what you're saying?
other states, natural heritage.
Yeah.
And actually more to the point, for about 20, 25 years, we've been exemplar.
Great.
We've been the leader. So we can't change that even if we wanted to. It's there in statute.
That we would work with other states and other heritage programs.
We have to by statute.
That's excellent. I appreciate knowing that. Yeah.
Thank you, Bruce. Do any of the other commissioners have questions or comments for?
Janie, no, I don't.
Thank you.
This is Kenning. I don't have any comments either.
Okay.
The same for Kinwall.
Okay. Well, I will assume that the commissioners don't have any further questions or comments for any of the public comments that have been offered that haven't already been made. Jenny, do you have any further questions or comments for any of the public comments that have been offered today?
Well, I think Bruce kind of hit on it. You know, what I think this proposal allows is for the effective administration of the data and the resulting information systems that support that data to be well managed through the state library in response to our partners' needs, as we already do and is such a priority for the state library, while at the same time ensuring that the research that goes on at the university and the very valuable projects that are handled through the university can also continue in a way where we're receiving additional core data services, core data products, as well as value-added products through those relationships. This is very much about relationships. That's what's at its heart. And I think the state library is exemplar in how we listen to our partners, manage those relationships. We want to continue a very, very effective relationship between how we manage the information and the research that's being conducted. The research is only important if that data is made available to our partners. That's something that we've talked about for many, many years. And that's something that I think this proposal can ensure.
Thank you. Do any of the commissioners have any questions or concerns or requests for additional information from Jenny? I'll ask that, and then we'll move on to other business and announcements.
Thank you, Anne. This is Elsie, and I think it's been a very good meeting for us as commissioners, plus also the public comment. Devil's in the details, always will be. So I guess more on the incremental plan, and maybe that can happen prior to our meeting, just exactly what we are expected to vote on as different from our December meeting.
Elsie, is that a question for Jenny? I'm wondering it because I don't know that we're prepared. Well, Jenny can't make a motion, and neither can I as far as what we're expected to vote for. Is that something that the commission wants to discuss?
Well, it's been my experience that through the presentation of proposed motions and the refinement thereby, we often get to a good place. And I think we should let the process go forward after considering what we've learned today.
And this meeting is, I just want to be careful because I want to tread lightly, because this meeting is not, there's no action coming from this meeting. So I don't know how much we want to discuss potential action. This was a listening and discussion meeting. But I don't want to, but Elsie, I want to make sure that we're answering, that we're getting you the information that you're asking for. I'm just not sure what that is.
Thank you. I so appreciate the meeting today. Again, I can't reiterate enough that the more information, I think anybody can say that a better decision will come out of it. What I'm asking, and I guess it may not be as an action item, of course, today, since this was informational, but just to be clarified on what the vote will be expected, or what the proposed question in front of us will be at our meeting in March. And that's something that I know that will come out with the agenda and everything else. At this point, we may not be able to have that. I just don't know if it's going to be exactly the same as it was in December, or if it would move forward incrementally.
I think it will move forward. I mean, I'm not proposing anything, but I think that any action would move forward incrementally, because I think that it's going to change as reflective of Jenny's report with OCHI and the different possibilities that were presented earlier today. Does any other,
thank you.
Another commissioner want to weigh in on that, or Jenny?
Yeah, this is Erin. I would like to say that it would be concerning it's concerning to me to think that we already have our minds made up. And I think that would be very concerning to the people who have given us public comment. So I think we need to just make sure that we're reading all of the materials that we are given. And then, on the day that we have our meeting, that this information is brought up and we do discussion like normal, and then come up with, our motion at that point. I don't want to, I hope it's not in anyone's mind that they already have everything made up and nothing's going to change their minds, because we'll need more information as we go forward.
Thanks, Erin.
This is Jamie. I agree with Erin, and I think it's important that we spend the time between now and our next meeting thinking about what we heard today, and also revisiting the material that we were sent and the previous discussions that we've had. As you say, this is not me that makes the decision, so I think I feel comfortable reading.
Thank you, Jamie. And there will be additional information as requested. There will be additional financial information in our packets for us to consider as well.
Yes. Yes. Perfect. I so appreciate this.
Okay, thanks. Do any other commissioners?
And I do.
Go ahead.
I do regret. I need to leave the call at this point, but I do appreciate everyone's energy and effort toward this. And Erin, you're spot on. We need the more information that we have to let it to have us understand the implication of whatever the March meeting might bring is very much important. So I appreciate your very much thoughtfulness. Thank you. And I appreciate everyone on the call. I apologize, I do need to jump off. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsie. Do any of the other commissioners have thoughts or requests for information or comments?
Bruce just requests that everyone goes online and reads the statute and the associated statutes with heritage stuff. And I would just remind my fellow commissioners also that we have a responsibility of putting noses into the works at the state library, including heritage, but keeping our fingers out, and that we need to rely upon whatever decision we make based upon financial and policy points of view. After we make that decision, we need to let our qualified administrative and other staff work out the details and make it work, and hold them accountable for that, but we don't have to figure it out. Thank God.
And we need to be civil.
Yes.
I want to make one point to, or at least I'll draw your attention to one thing. in terms of the documentation from your December meeting and the February meeting, what I would propose then is that we remove the timeline that currently exists in the December proposal and have a discussion around the document that you see on the screen as a better path forward.
Yeah, that works for me.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. If there are no further questions,
And it sounds right, but let us remember to be civil.
Thank you. Yes.
Does anybody have any other business or announcements? Okay, hearing none, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all very much for attending, and we'll meet again next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne.
Thanks.
Hey, I wanted to chat with you about something. And you got it, I don't understand.